All right, let's dive into episode 2, where I am taking parts of my book, And God Remembered Noah, a mother's heart opening journey through 22 weeks in the NICU, and giving the parallel to post Hurricane Helene recovery here in Evans, Georgia. My pregnancy didn't come at my ideal time in life, yet I was determined to make it the best experience possible. My first trimester was great. At 8 weeks, I had both boy and girl names picked out. When I started my second trimester, my body started acting a bit funny. I lacked energy, my feet started to swell, and my blood pressure was beginning to creep up. There are some childhood habits that I never grew out of, and checking my blood pressure was one of them. My dad had blood pressure issues, so he had blood pressure monitors at his house, and I would check my pressure. Over time, I noticed my blood pressure going from being around 117 to 125 to 130. And as my pressure was creeping up, I noticed my feet started to swell. At one point, I had finished work, got home, and checked my blood pressure, and it was 150 over 100. This prompted my first concerned phone call to my midwife's office. I'm not a doctor, and yet I knew this wasn't a normal blood pressure since I used to work with women who fell into a high risk pregnancy category. When I called the midwife's office, they told me that if I felt I needed to go to the ER, then I should do so. What? My blood pressure prompted a couple more calls and visits to the hospital. Late one night, my mom took me to the ER because my pressure was hanging out around 190 over 100, and it wasn't coming down. I was put into a room on labor and delivery floor for observation, and while being monitored, my blood pressure stayed in the medical normal range. The nurse returned to the room and shared part of the phone conversation that she had had with the doctor. They told me I was a hypochondriac because I was monitoring my pressure at home. The nurse said, "We don't normally have moms checking their pressure at home." Swelling and elevated blood pressure were the only two preeclamptic pregnancy symptoms I had. Because I didn't have any other issues and wasn't complaining about headaches or seeing spots, the hospital sent me home and told me to follow up with my midwife. I got bed rest for my birthday. Happy birthday, me. um, I knew something wasn't right. On Tuesday, the day before Noah was born, I hadn't felt a move in over 24 hours. I had gotten hooked up to monitors so they could check for movement. They would bring me 16 to 20 ounces of juice. I would take it, and there was still no movement. They brought me more juice 30 minutes later with the same result: no movement. The staff was calling and leaving messages for the doctor and waiting for a call back. They were leaving messages with a physician that I was never seeing. I saw the midwife, and they weren't calling her. As lunchtime rolled around, I was super hungry, and all I had was a bunch of juice. I had gotten a craving for a fish sandwich that was something that was salty and substantial and would satisfy my cravings. The staff discussed getting me a catheter, but they tabled this discussion for now. Fortunately, yet unfortunately, they changed their minds. After 6 hours of monitoring and no movement, the monitor noted two decelerations. Instead of the lines going up with movement, the lines went down, meaning Noah was having trouble while in utero. So, that part of my pregnancy story parallels with this post hurricane part of my story, as I didn't have quote unquote substantial damage to my home because of the hurricane. A tree from my neighbor's yard did fall onto my house, but my house was still livable. It just needed to be tarped in the area that it fell. There was roof damage, but there was no major interior damage. There was some leaking, but nothing bad. So I'm working with a general contractor. He had a roofer. They came out. They took off the shingles for the part that was messed up from the tree. And they put something down, maybe flashing. I don't know. I'm not a roofer. I don't know what it's called. But they put that down. And it sat for 2 weeks. That's not the problem. We hadn't had rain in nearly 6 weeks. So since Helene hit the central Savannah River area, we haven't had rain. And 2 days before the roofers were to come and put the shingles back on the roof and fix the roof, the contractor came on a Monday evening and said, we'll be here first thing Tuesday morning to get the shingles on, or to tarp the house. That's what it was, to tarp the house. I said, you probably want to go ahead and do it tonight because we don't know what time it's supposed to rain. So it's better to be proactive. Go ahead and put the tarp on. He said, it'll be fine. We'll be there first thing in the morning. Well, it wasn't fine because it rained overnight. And that morning, woke up and had spots all over my ceiling. And then, as the day progressed, I knew the ceiling was going to cave in the way that the water was sitting. So this goes back to my pregnancy and me checking my blood pressure and saying something is wrong and being dismissed by my care team, being called a hypochondriac. It's not that bad, which the contractor said, it'll be okay. I ended up calling in the middle of the day saying, you have to come back over here and you have to tarp this room, or, help me move the things out of the room because the ceiling is going to cave in. So did come back over, had some people to help, covered the things. And this is Noah's playroom, his therapy room, his art room. So there's quite a bit of stuff in there. So they came back and they tarped it. I'm like, okay, the ceiling is going to fall. So it was, if the ceiling falls, it's okay because everything in the room is covered. Just still not a satisfactory answer to me, but what am I going to do? And sure enough, that afternoon, it fell. The ceiling fell in, caved in. And so next thing, I call the contractor back. You have to come back and seal off this room. We can't breathe this. My son is immunocompromised. He can't be breathing this in. We're having all kinds of issues. We'll be looking up to the sky. You have to fix this. And it was, I can do it, but I won't be able to come and do it until tomorrow morning. And so that's kind of where I left off with my pregnancy as well. It was Naomi continuing to say something is wrong, not being listened to because I didn't have all of the quote unquote textbook symptoms for preeclampsia, and action was not taken with Noah me and Noah, until there started to be this deceleration. And the same thing with my house, knowing that this is going to be a problem and we can head it off if we do these simple steps. And by not taking those simple steps, now we have this bigger problem. So stay tuned to the next episode to see what happens with Noah and with the house.